I thank organizers for inviting me for such an important conference. I would say timely conference, not timely in the sense that it is of actualité, like in the mass media, we are discussing every day ethics and politics, but on the contrary, because it will be preparing the future. It is actualité in the more academic and intellectual sense that we have to raise these issues already now in order to control or to give a new road, new direction to our futures. So I think the Research Center for Legislation and Ethics will be a very important center of attraction for all academicians and politicians who take these questions seriously. Now I will start, I thought I was the end, so I wanted to start from the empirical question first, the second question rather than the first one, the awakening of Arab societies or the Arab revolutions, the Arab Spring, whatever you want to call. What are the consequences of these changes? I think first is this change dismantled the representation of the Middle East region and the North African countries as a bloc. We had this representation of these countries as if they were unalterable unit. They were called Arab regimes, meaning economically stagnating and politically authoritarian. I think this is already shattered. We cannot speak of the Arab regimes as a bloc. And I think although different countries follow different trajectories with different obstacles and setbacks, one thing is certain: there is a horizon for policymaking, politics as democracy building in these countries. And that promise is very important. And as a citizens' movement, as becoming subjects of history, all Arab countries have this horizon of possibility. Now, first, I think already the labeling of these movements were debated, controversial. Is it a revolution, the awakening, the upheaval, popular resurgence? But all of them indicated one thing, I would say, the public character of these movements. That is, not before the politics, citizens manifested their presence in the public life. And public life not always in the way that we think like debating, but like occupying Tahrir Square or immolation in Tunisia. For me, there is a public quality in all these transformations. Citizens manifested themselves as individuals, not as a group only, as individuals in the public square, in the public life, in the streets. And that is this character, which is, I think, very important. I will come to this theme in my presentation. All through my talk, this publicness will be very important. So their revolt and their showing, their manifesting their presence was saying enough and dégage to the powers, but also, as so many said before me, putting on the table some ethical issues like dignity, anti-corruption. I think Dr. Jasser Auda said it will be preparing the future. It is actualité in the more academic and intellectual sense that we have to raise these issues already now in order to control or to give a new road, new direction to our futures. So I think the Research Center for Legislation and Ethics will be a very important center of attraction for all academicians and politicians who take these questions seriously. Now I will start, I thought I was the end, so I wanted to start from the empirical question first, the second question rather than the first one, the awakening of Arab societies or the Arab revolutions, the Arab Spring, whatever you want to call. What are the consequences of these changes? I think first is this change dismantled the representation of the Middle East region and the North African countries as a bloc. We had this representation of these countries as if they were unalterable unit. They were called Arab regimes, meaning economically stagnating and politically authoritarian. I think this is already shattered. We cannot speak of the Arab regimes as a bloc. And I think although different countries follow different trajectories with different obstacles and setbacks, one thing is certain: there is a horizon for politics as democracy building in these countries. And that promise is very important. And as a citizens' movement, as becoming subjects of history, all Arab countries have this horizon of possibility. Now, first, I think already the labeling of these movements were debated, controversial. Is it a revolution, the awakening, the upheaval, popular resurgence? But all of them indicated one thing, I would say: the public character of these movements. That is, not before the politics, citizens manifested their presence in the public life. And public life not always in the way that we think like debating, but like occupying Tahrir Square or immolation in Tunisia. For me, there is a public quality in all these transformations. Citizens manifested themselves as individuals, not as a group only, as individuals in the public square, in the public life, in the streets. And that is this character, which is, I think, very important. I will come to this theme in my presentation. All through my talk, this publicness will be very important. So their revolt and their showing, their manifesting their presence was saying enough and dégage to the powers, but also, as so many said before me, putting on the table some ethical issues like dignity, anti-corruption. I think Dr. Jasser Auda said it was an ethical revolution. That's why it is so important that we have to discuss what is the underlying ethics, because we know that the revolution was not made only by Muslims, but by all kinds of citizens. But still, we have to think about this ethical dimension. So this meant a paradigmatic shift in democratic imaginaries. We always referred to the Western countries in thinking about democracy. Now the center of democratic imaginary shifted from the West to the East with the Arab revolutions. So even they became sources of inspiration in other European cities, like in Spain, even in France. I heard French people saying, I would have liked to be a Tunisian, and being proud of being like a Tunisian. And this kind of change in place, so we has turned our gazes to Arab countries as a form of democracy. And why it was important? Because this autonomization from the West, and not yet against Western societies. I think this in-betweenness was very important. Autonomization from the Western ways of imagining democracy, yet it is not turning against the West. These were not any identity movements turning against the West, but trying to build up consensus within the society, a pluralistic way. I think I take this as a promise, first of all. Second paradigmatic shift that I will more insist on is opening the question in a different way in relation to the binary thinking between secularism on the one hand and Islamism on the other hand. The vicious circle that really kept these societies in an authoritarian power, that is secular authoritarianism, against Islamic protest movements, and then the alternation, the fear that Islamization will take over all the secular and secular politics. I think we are asking the question in a new way for the first time. We are asking the question not in terms of alternating, that is one, the failure of secularism leading to the success of Islamization, but rather how we can think them together in a more horizontal relation. How, without the hegemony of the one over the other, can we recompose both in a new way without meaning that one becomes the other? I think this question of horizontal recomposition between the secular and the Islamic is the question that I will take seriously coming out from the Arab transformation. In other words, how Islamic reference becomes part of that transformation, not the only transformation, the outcome, but part of this transformation. In that respect, I would like to bring into the picture the Turkish experience, because Arab Spring also brought Turkey to attention. Why? And that's because of this promise maybe to go beyond this vicious circle between the military-backed up authoritarian secularism and protest, Islamic protest. Turkey has been divided in terms of these two also power of the Islamic and then the power of the secular Kemalist elite, as you know very well. I think Turkey as a reference, I'm speaking, appears. Why? Because it was considered to be a torn between country by the author of Clash of Civilizations, Huntington, a torn between country that is neither this nor that one, between the West and the East, without having a particular identity. She was disregarded by the West, by the Europeans, as a non-Arab, therefore non-representative of the Middle East countries, but also non-desirable by the European Union when she presented herself as the candidate for Europe. Turkey was not respected by the Arab elites or by the Arab street neither, because they're totally non-autonomous and trying to be part of the Western world. Today it becomes part of the picture. Without being Arabic, it becomes, I think, part of the picture. The same questions can be raised for Turkey, but also from Turkey. Why? Why Turkey becomes acquires new visibility, why it can enter into our conversation to raise some of these questions. First, I think it didn't happen in one day. First, in relation to foreign politics. And that is maybe related with, at the end, I will come from the ground, from the empirical examples, from the historical examples to the question of ethics. I think that I will give just three dates, historical dates, to understand how Turkey became more autonomous from the Western powers. One is 2003, when the parliament rejected a motion that would have permitted the American troops to launch an invasion of Iraq from Turkish soil. And I think this was a very important moment because Turkey expressed by democratic means, by political means, from the parliamentary vote, that's very important, from the parliamentary vote. That's not a military decision. This is not a decision of the AKP in power neither. This is a decision coming out from the parliament. So they rejected that motion. That was a very important turning point in Turkey. It created lots of anxieties, losing Western alliance and American alliance, but still it made things change in the long run. Second, I go quickly, 2005, European Union opened the negotiations with Turkey, but it meant no to Turkey. We know from the debates in the European countries that the heart was not there. The door was opened, but the hearts of the European citizens were against Turkish candidacy. That meant also a disillusionment for the Turkish people who thought that becoming part of the European Union was a natural path. This also has a very important effect in terms of ethics because Turkey had to sort out herself what is just, what is unjust, and not always asking to the big brothers. That is a very important autonomization as well. And then the 2009 and 2010 Turkish-Israel relations went really in more deteriorated. And with the Gaza offensive, the blockades against the Gaza, the Turkish Mavi Marmara, the flotilla, and the incident that 9 Turkish citizens were killed. And before then, Tayyip Erdogan, the president of the AKP party, who made this 1-minute intervention, this all resonated in the Turkish society, but also in the Arabic countries as a more just politics. So just politics, meaning in relation to some events being on the side of the history, on the side of those who are oppressed. And I think in that sense, Turkey foreign policy meant a kind of autonomization. So for ethics, we have to speak about, therefore, ethics in politics, a kind of autonomization. And then secondly, what made Turkey maybe interesting to refer to in our discussions is the question of hizmet. The way they governed the AKP, hizmet is a very important notion, bringing services. So again, that resonates with the Islamic ethics. They started with the municipalities and bringing more services for the poor, the medical care, and education and housing. I don't go into it. It's not only the numbers, the growth rate of Turkey that they can be sometimes very pompous about it. The issue is how they have divided Okay, I will finish in 10 minutes. Also the poverty. But third made it for the Arab world, why Turkey is becoming closer to the Arab world, is the model of proximity, or let's say politics of proximity with the soft power. Museums, art, galleries, and all the private universities, exchanges, so economic, and that's not in the hands of the Muslim power. It's not in the hands of the state power. It's totally autonomous from the state as well. And I think for these three reasons, that is more just policy and just distribution, services, and also becoming part of the democracy, like a learning process with the neighbors. For the first time, Turkey became part of the neighbors. That singled out Turkey maybe as an experience which can be a model. Model doesn't mean here to be a model to be taken without any problem. On the contrary, it shows something that was thought not to be possible. That is how to think beyond the religious secular divide. I think that is what made the singularity of the Turkish experience worth speaking in relation to ethics and politics for the Arab countries. That is how we can articulate the Islamic reference with democratic pluralism. And I think AKP, in power since 2002, went beyond this vicious circle between secular authoritarianism and Islamic radicalism. Just now, one parenthesis coming to this publicness now. This was preceded, the coming to power of the AKP, this was preceded before the role of the intellectuals, both from secular and the religious, pious intellectuals played a very important role in the public life. Free speech, that was really, it started with round tables bringing together people, intellectuals, journalists from different convictions with different faith and discussing and debating. So there was an ethics of conversation that helped to build up a new space that helped us to go beyond this religious secular divide. Maybe sohbet in the Islamic tradition, how to engage with each other in a way which is not formal around the round tables, getting familiar, and so therefore falling down, thickening the tall, thinning the thick wall between two Turkeys, secular and religious. Now, the issue was the headscarf issue, the covering of women, still a very important controversial issue after 25 years, is still there after the power. But again, the division between secular feminists and pious women was so important that they were part of this, let's say, non-democratic politics were very often backed up by secular feminist movements like in European cases today. Now, after 25 years, only recently, a week ago, secular feminists participated to a petition in favor of claims for covered Muslim women for their rights to have access to public functions, to public jobs. This is the first in Turkey. This is important. And I think this kind of not consensus building, but getting to know each other's point of view, and not only fighting for your own rights, but for the rights of others is important. I had to wait for 25 years to have this. Now I can really wait for the fact that secular feminists backed up the rights of religious women's rights to have public access. But still, I think you have asked us to see the success story in our lives, so that's why I bring this to your attention. Now, therefore, to take the lessons more at a more ethical level now. The questions, the critical questions, what I'm getting at is, first, the relation between political power and public life. And I think we have to address these issues if we want to address an issue of ethics, because what I'm trying to show, there is this autonomy of the public sphere we need from the public autonomy from the political rule. This is very important, because you cannot, if you reduce public life to political rule, there is no place for debating and no place for pluralism. So how the autonomy can be reassured by Islamic jurisprudence? So that's one of the questions I think I would like to address to the first session, maybe. So what are the ways of asking the question of autonomy of the public sphere? Because I come again, the new page for the Arab countries is this owning the streets and owning the public life and not leaving it only to the rulers. That has been in the traditional also societies. The autonomy of the public sphere was reassured by the ulema. Ulema was the checking force in terms of morality of the rulers. So today, the public sphere made up of intellectuals, theologians, artists, media people, citizens, musicians, they are counter-checking sources, powers of the political. So I think that autonomy of the public is very important. And public matters, but it's always individual. We come to the public life always as a person, not always as a group, as a person. So, and sometimes not in conformity with the political rule, but not always in conformity with the collectivity. We were discussing about the morality and responsibility in relation to music and arts, but there are moments, and I think Yusuf Islam has pointed out, there's a road that we take, we don't know always where it will take us. So that part of creativity, part of individual voices, sometimes might mean a kind of dissidency in relation to our own communities. So I think what Islamic ethic has to say, how it ensures the individual dissident voices. And I think this is one of the questions that we face also in modern societies, how Islamic ethics will be a kind of response, how we are going to respond to critiques coming from Muslims themselves or from non-Muslims, as we face in the European public sphere every day today. So, third, why public is important? Because it is the only way to resist to the tyranny of the majority. That question also, I think, is a question that is raised in relation to Islamic ethics. And I see it in the Turkish case as well. Often, the idea of majority, the idea of the people, is used as justifying all kinds of politics without accountability. So the issue of minorities arise. And my point is, do we have other ways of thinking the rights of those who are not in the majority, other than minority-majority rights? Because in the West, this has been framed in terms of minority and majority rights. Are there other ways of thinking these differences in the public sphere, and what Islamic ethic can offer us beyond this minority-majority rights? And when I say against the tyranny of the majority, again, in relation to the problems that we are facing, living in every country, is because state power always represents itself as national community, sometimes, over different ethnicities. So the question of ethnic differences. Or sometimes it is the majority of one religion over another's. In Turkey, Sunni religion is criticized to take over the Alawite, for instance. So these are the issues that the governments are facing. Or patriarchal norms against or imposed upon women. So when I mean how in the public life, all these different persons, not only groups and ideas, but different individuals can take place in the public life, and and they can debate their opinions, confront their differences, and explore maybe new norms for a shared norms. And I think this is why public life for me is very important, because it's like here we try to explore, to understand our differences and similarities, to come up with new shared values or norms. In that sense, the free speech, but also this gathering together, the possibility to gather together, like in the public space, is very important. Coming to the last 2 points, public sphere, as it has been raised in some of the questions in the previous panel, is predominated by commercial aesthetics and by production of stereotypes on each other, like Islamic stereotypes in the European cases, but also by provocation, more and more, rather than rational debate or some kind of compassionate, we are facing more and more provocation, commercial aesthetics, and production of stereotypes. How we can restore a public life as a site of civility, I think this is, again, a very important question that we face. How Islamic ethics can help us in confronting our differences and yet engage with each other. This is, again, very important because most of the time Islamic ethics is for conformity. But now in a pluralistic world, we are confronting our differences. Can we have a way to rethink about our modes of agency, modes of debate, a virtue, public virtue, so that it can be enhanced in a more civil public sphere? Last question. I think we get over, we are turning the page on this authoritarian secular regimes. We have to be conscious about it. Maybe it's not over yet, but it is behind us. And we are trying to approach our histories now not in binary terms, alternating between the two, neither in the footsteps of the Western, but we are trying to think by ourselves. And I think in that context, how Islamic thinking and ethics will engage with our secular age becomes very important, not only turning towards to the fundamentals of Islam, but also to the modern life that question these sources, so that we can have really answers that will make us maybe a possibility for a new kind of exemplarity. That is how this part of the world will become maybe more exemplary of a new democratic imaginary, but more also of an ethic public life. So I think we need to struggle, because we have turned this page now, that we need to struggle more than ever to raise critical questions from an ethical point of view. Thank you.